My father was a furrier. He was a furrier, and I guess Sam was also in the fur trade also, but he became involved with the union, and he had organized his Benny's shop. All I remember is I didn't spend a lot of time with him because he was never really home. He spent a lot of time with the union stuff.
Right.
So I was basically, I brought up myself. I grew up without any help from them. They encouraged us, but I didn't interact very much. All I remember was that he was concerned about my handwriting, and he would look at my homework. If it wasn't written properly, it wasn't neat enough, I'd have to do it over again. We had our first camp we went to was part of the Fur Workers Union. It was White Lake Lodge, I believe it was. In the first years, I guess we were from 5 until about 7. Then we went to Wyandotte, which was in New York, and there was a outbreak of polio.
Oh.
And we came back. They closed the camp because of the outbreak, and we got gamma globulin, which was
Right. Right. We know about it.
yeah.
Let's say on this.
Then at about when I guess I was about 9, we went to College Settlement Farm Camp. It was a Red Feather Agency camp.
Red Feather is what?
It's like a Red Cross kind of
For needy kids.
for needy kids.
For the kids.
Yeah, because both myself and my brother, we went there. It was very inexpensive. We went there for mainly all summer, so we didn't see our parents that much during the summer. And we were there, I guess, until we became junior counselors at the age of 15. I was there a couple more years until I turned 16 or 17.
I add something.
Sure.
Yes, sure.
The counselors would take him bowling and would get him drunk.
No, I would get myself drunk.
Oh,
sorry.
okay.
How old were you then? Tell me about this.
I was 17.
Oh, you were
16, 17. I was yeah, well, as a junior counselor at the time, we were near Willow Grove Park, and they had a huge bowling alley. It was one of the largest in the areas, and they had a bar in the bowling alley, and it helped my bowling score considerably.
Tell me, as an identical twin, what was your life like with your brother?
There was a great deal of competition.
What a surprise.
Yeah, isn't it though? But we were pretty comparable in terms of when we graduated high school. I think I was 7th or 8th, and he was 9th, something like that, out of a class of 450.
How'd you deal with your brother's sickness?
I was very upset. And I was actually the month. About a couple months before he died, when he had come back in August from I guess it was Romania. Yeah. He was there with his wife at the time, and they told him there that he had to come home because they couldn't treat him. They never found it was melanoma, but they never found the primary site. And I was supposed to, I guess a month before he died, or shortly before he died, I was to go down and he was going to get a blood transfusion. Bone marrow transplant from me.
Because you're being identical twins, yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately he died before that could happen. Well, I was, as a twin brother, it was very upsetting. Again, we were very competitive. We were at odds all the time. I think one of the reasons was that when we were growing up, I was a little bit more social than he was, I thought. I was required by my parents to bring Bob along when I was invited to a party.
I met Don. He was making out with a girl down the hall from me in our dormitory, and I thought he was very cute, and I wanted to make out with him. And a few months later, he broke up with this girl, but in the interim, she had introduced me to him and his brother, his twin. Then in December of '65 at Penn State University, I saw him at Hillel, and we folk danced together. And then it was Christmas vacation, and I sent a message to him through a mutual friend to tell him to have a very nice vacation, and he thought that was very, very nice of me. So when we came back from vacation in '66, he called me up and asked me for a date. I saw what I thought was him leaning over the water fountain at Hillel, taking a drink of water, and I went over to him and put my arm around him, and I said, I had such a wonderful night. And next thing I know, Don comes from behind me and says, don't ever make that mistake again. And so I thought that was very romantic, being only 19 years old. And then we were together, I guess maybe that was 65 we were together, yeah.
Yeah.
No. And, no, don't blur me. So we were together, and then I was staying at Penn State the summer of 1965, and he asked me if I'd feel better if we were engaged, and I said yeah I would, and he asked me to marry him then in the back of Hillel in the backyard, and he said don't tell anybody, and I immediately ran and called my mother and father. But in the interim, we had broken up because some of his friends told him they thought he was too young, and they felt that we were too young to be engaged because we were 19. You were 18 and a half, I think. And we got engaged without a ring, always without a ring. Everything. I've already told them the story about the Howard Johnson's ring. And, but Bob, Don, and whoever Bob was dating at the time, and then eventually Diane Cohen, and before that, Nona. We all hung out together a lot. We did, and then we had a mutual friends, Donna and Marilyn Melman, and the six of us hung out together a lot. So we had a good time. We had a very nice time. Got along with Bob very well, and Diane and Nona, whoever he was dating. Yeah.
Been married for a long time.
Yeah. Yes.
48 years.
48 years.
Kidding.
Yep.
Wow.
Sandy asked what I thought about our relationship, and I have to second Daryl's thoughts. It's been very long.
Thank you.
Now, this is your first wife, right?
Yes. And because of my children, it'll be my only wife.
You're welcome, Mom.
Thank you, sweetheart. Thank you.
Oh, the question is, why did I go into teaching? And the reason is, when I graduated from Penn State, I went off to Case Western Reserve to get a PhD in math. And unfortunately, it was the middle of the Vietnam War, and I had a student deferment, and Johnson, in his wisdom, ended all student deferments. So in order to stay out of the war, I had to get a job teaching. And so I was at Case, but they wouldn't hire. I thought of getting a job in the Cleveland area, but they wouldn't hire anyone because of if you were not a resident there, apparently, where that was to avoid the war. Right. So I had to come to Philadelphia to get a teaching job, and I taught for 6 years in Philadelphia. At the same time, I decided I wanted to go to law school. So I got into law school, and I went to law school at night, continued teaching, and I've stayed in it ever since.
Which one? Law school or teaching?
Teaching.
Oh, okay.
Teaching. I got 2 law degrees, but a lot of my friends who are attorneys spend a lot of time away from their home. And I wanted to spend time with my family. So I decided to stick with the teaching. I enjoyed that. I got a lot of satisfaction out of teaching. It was very frustrating with the law, and I thought I made the right decision. I hope I did.
How do you feel about being a draft dodger?
I have no problem with that. I was against the Vietnam War, and it was a terrible war to begin with. To add something to that in terms of my father, it was not unusual in the early 50s. He was on the FBI would come to the front door, and my father would go out the back door.
God, oh God! Oh, great.
The 50s were terrible.
Yes. again, they were my parents. Again, we were living in Philadelphia. A lot of their friends lost their jobs because of the McCarthy era, who were teachers in Philadelphia public school system. It was very sad.
I lost teacher.
Oh, the question was my father ever brought before the FBI or the McCarthy? And no, I don't. Not they didn't catch him. No, I guess he wasn't important enough. It's interesting because we got a TV in the early 50s. I guess it was 53, 54. And the first thing I remember seeing that my parents were watching was the Army McCarthy hearings.
Yes, and we
We'll
watched
watch
it
it
too. We were at the edge of
Yeah, the question was, how did I feel when I was in high school because of my background and how I interacted with my high school friends? Well, if people know me fairly well, I didn't have many friends. I kept to myself a lot. And I guess one of the reasons is that they didn't appreciate I was somewhat outspoken. And I had a reputation, my brother had a reputation for being leftist in that particular period of time. And And so I didn't have many friends, so it didn't really make that much difference to me. I had my own things that I did, and other friends who were outside did folk dancing with different groups.
Other communists.
Yeah, probably. Sure. That's who I palled around with. I did
Of course,
well.
that was later too. That wasn't right in that part of that.
No, this was again.
they
I
were
was born in '45, so in '55 I was 10. Yeah, I tried. I was only 10 years old at the
Right,
time. This is when I was in high school. I went to high school between '60 and '63, and at that time, I was very surprised. It's interesting. One of the most biggest surprises I had was when I was in ninth grade. I was nominated to be the president of my homeroom class. I figured I didn't have many friends. I spoke to a number of people, but I didn't think they were very close. They elected me president of my classroom. Of course, there were pictures. This goes later on. They had. I remember seeing a picture of me. They took pictures of the student council meetings, and I was probably half asleep most of the time, which is my reputation when I started teaching. I was known to take breaks when I had a free period to lie down and take a nap and get up right before the bell rang. So that was my reputation.
Impressed.
But also, was originally in my first year. I was in engineering at Penn State, engineering science. But I dropped out of that because it was all engineering courses and math courses.
Yes.
And I wanted a well-rounded education, so I dropped and I became a math major. That's why
You should have done is try dating someone from Cornell. It's
It's too late now.
too late now. Yeah.
I could try, but I don't think it will work.
They don't hear it. They can't hear it.
I see. Sandy asked what I thought about our relationship, and I have to second Daryl's thoughts. It's been very long.
Thank you.
Now, this is your first wife, right?
Yes.